The starship Asterisk Eternal Wisdom hung silently above the blue planet, its silver hull catching the light of a yellow sun that the primitive species below called Sol. Ambassador Velcris of the Silithan Dominion stood at the observation deck, his 4 eyes scanning the world beneath him with a mixture of curiosity and disgust. This was the 37th primitive world he had catalogued in his career, and he expected this one would be no different from the others. "What do the scans reveal?" he asked his science officer, a tall creature named Threnvex whose skin shifted colors with his emotions. Threnvex pulled up a holographic display that showed the planet in great detail, and his skin turned a pale shade of yellow that indicated mild amusement. "They call themselves humans, Ambassador. They have achieved basic space travel within their own star system, but their technology is remarkably crude." Velcris leaned forward with interest as the data scrolled across the display. "How crude are we talking about?" "They still use chemical propulsion for their spacecraft," Threnvex said with a laugh that sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "They burn fuel and ride the explosion into space like children playing with fire." The ambassador's 4 eyes went wide with disbelief. The Concord of 12 had abandoned chemical propulsion over 15,000 years ago, back when the galaxy was young and species were still learning to crawl between the stars. "Surely they have developed better weapons at least?" Velcris asked. Threnvex's skin turned bright orange with barely contained amusement. "Ambassador, you will not believe this, but they still use projectile weapons. They fire small pieces of metal at each other using controlled explosions." The entire bridge crew burst into laughter at this revelation. Projectile weapons were something out of ancient history books, relics of a time before graviton manipulation and plasma technology had made such primitive tools obsolete. Velcris shook his head slowly, feeling a strange mix of pity and contempt for the species below. "What about their energy production?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer would be disappointing. "They burn dead organic matter for energy," Threnvex replied. "They also split atoms in controlled reactions, which is slightly more advanced, but they have not discovered quantum vacuum extraction or stellar core tapping." The ambassador walked closer to the viewing window and stared down at the planet with its swirling white clouds and deep blue oceans. It was a beautiful world, he had to admit, but its inhabitants were clearly thousands of years behind the rest of the galaxy. "Have they achieved faster-than-light travel?" he asked. "No, Ambassador. They are completely confined to their own star system, and their fastest ships would take decades to reach even the nearest star." Velcris turned away from the window and walked toward his command chair, his long robes flowing behind him like water. He had seen enough to make his assessment, and he saw no reason to waste any more time on this backwater world. "Begin recording my official report for the Concord Council," he commanded. A soft chime indicated that the ship systems were ready to receive his words. "This is Ambassador Velcris of the Silithan Dominion, speaking on behalf of the Concord of 12. I have completed my assessment of the planet known locally as Earth, located in a remote spiral arm of the galaxy." He paused to gather his thoughts before continuing. "The dominant species, known as humans, has achieved basic technological civilization, but remains far below Concord standards. Their propulsion systems are primitive, their weapons are laughable, and their energy production methods are inefficient and dirty." Threnvex nodded in agreement as the ambassador continued his assessment. "Species classification: pre-ascendant, threat level, negligible. I recommend standard quarantine protocols and passive observation. Based on their current trajectory and their apparent love of violence against their own kind, I estimate they will destroy themselves within 300 years. The ambassador ended the recording and felt satisfied with his work. Another primitive species catalogued, another world marked for observation and nothing more. "Transmit the report to Concord headquarters," he ordered, and set a course for the next system on our survey list. The asterisk Eternal Wisdom turned away from Earth and activated its faster-than-light drive, vanishing into the darkness of space in a flash of blue light. The humans below never knew they had been watched and judged and found wanting. 3 weeks later, the conquered council reviewed Velcris's report in their great chamber on the capital world of Sci the Prime. 12 species had representatives in this chamber, each one ancient and powerful and utterly convinced of their own superiority. "Another primitive world," said High Counselor Emrindal, "a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell. How tiresome these surveys have become." "Should we not make contact?" asked the representative from the Kelvoran Collective, a hive-minded species that communicated through shared consciousness. "Perhaps we could guide them toward enlightenment." Velcris shook his head firmly. "I would advise against it, honored representatives. The humans are violent and unpredictable. They have fought countless wars against their own kind using increasingly destructive weapons. If we gave them access to real technology, they would likely use it to destroy themselves and possibly others." The council murmured in agreement. They had seen such things before with other primitive species, and they had no desire to repeat past mistakes. "Then we are in agreement," High Counselor Emrindal declared. "Earth will be quarantined and monitored, but no contact will be made. Let the humans play with their fire and their metal slugs until they either grow up or burn themselves out." The vote was unanimous, and Earth's fate was sealed with casual indifference. The greatest civilizations in the galaxy had looked upon humanity and seen nothing worth their attention. But deep in the darkness between galaxies, something stirred. Sensors that had been dormant for 1,000 years flickered back to life as ancient machines detected the energy signatures of living civilizations. The harvesters had awakened. They were not alive in any way the conquered would recognize, but they were hungry in a way that transcended biology. They consumed civilizations the way a fire consumes wood, and they had been sleeping for far too long. A signal passed between countless machine vessels, a communication that moved faster than light and carried a simple message. Resources detected, harvesting protocols initiated, estimated consumption time for target region, 47 standard years. 10,000 ships began to move through the void, their hulls black as the space between stars, their weapons systems charging with energy that could crack planets like eggs. The conquered of 12 had no idea what was coming for them. They were too busy laughing at the primitive humans and their silly projectile weapons to notice the darkness gathering at the edge of their territory. And in that arrogance, in that casual dismissal of anything they deemed beneath them, lay the seeds of their destruction. The humans, meanwhile, continued their lives on their little blue planet, unaware that they had been judged and dismissed, unaware that an ancient horror was awakening in the depths of space, unaware that the galaxy would soon learn a terrible lesson about the difference between primitive and dangerous. The stars continued to shine, cold and indifferent, keeping their secrets as they always had. But not for much longer. The Scythian homeworld burned beneath a sky filled with black ships. Velcris ran through streets he had walked his entire life, streets that were now covered in ash and rubble, and the bodies of those who had not run fast enough. The screams of his people filled the air, mixing with the terrible sound of harvester weapons tearing through buildings like paper. "How is this possible?" he gasped as he ducked into an alley to avoid a patrol of machine soldiers, their metal bodies gleaming with stolen energy. 6 hours ago, the Scythian defense fleet had been the most powerful military force in 3 sectors. They had plasma cannons that could melt asteroids, graviton projectors that could crush enemy ships into balls of twisted metal, and psionic amplifiers that could disable entire crews with a single thought. None of it had mattered. The harvesters had adapted to everything. When the Scythians fired plasma weapons, The machines analyzed the energy signature and reconfigured their shields to absorb it within seconds. When they used graviton projectors, the harvesters simply adjusted their mass distribution to become immune. When they tried psionic attacks, they discovered that machines had no minds to assault. Velcris reached the emergency spaceport where a single diplomatic shuttle waited, its engines already warming for launch. He was not a soldier or a hero, just an ambassador who had been lucky enough to be near an escape route when the attack began. "Ambassador Velcris," shouted a young officer from the shuttle's open door. "Hurry, we must leave now." He ran across the open landing pad, his robes catching fire from the heat of nearby explosions, and threw himself through the door just as the shuttle lifted off. Through the window, he watched his world die beneath him. The great crystal towers of Scylla the Prime, which had stood for 20,000 years, crumbled into dust as harvester beams cut through them. The orbital defense platforms, which the conquered had believed were invincible, drifted in pieces through the upper atmosphere. The billions of souls who had called this world home were being harvested, their biological matter converted into fuel for the machine fleet. "Where do we go?" Velcris asked the pilot, though he already knew there was nowhere safe. "The harvesters have taken the Kelvoran worlds. They have destroyed the Emrindal energy beings. They are consuming everything." The pilot, a young woman with terror in her eyes, shook her head. "I do not know, Ambassador. The conquered is falling. Our weapons do not work against them. Nothing works against them." Velcris sat in silence as the shuttle fled through the chaos of dying ships and desperate refugees. His mind raced through possibilities, searching for any hope, any chance of survival. And then he remembered the blue planet. He remembered the humans with their chemical rockets and their projectile weapons and their nuclear power plants. He remembered laughing at them with the bridge crew, dismissing them as primitives who would destroy themselves. But the humans had something that the conquered did not have. They had never relied on energy weapons. "Set a course for the Sol system," Velcris ordered, his voice suddenly firm. The pilot looked at him like he had gone insane. "The quarantined world. Ambassador, those primitives cannot help us. They have no real technology." "They have different technology," Velcris replied. "And right now, different might be exactly what we need." The shuttle's faster-than-light drive engaged, and they disappeared into the void, leaving the burning ruins of the conquered behind them. The journey took 3 days, 3 days during which Velcris received scattered reports of one conquered world after another falling to the harvester swarm. By the time they reached the Sol system, he estimated that over 60% of conquered space had been consumed. The shuttle's systems began to fail as they entered Earth's atmosphere, damaged by the long journey and the battles they had witnessed. Velcris gripped his seat as the ship shook violently, smoke filling the cabin. "We are going down," the pilot screamed. "I cannot control it." The last thing Velcris saw before impact was a vast stretch of brown desert rushing up to meet them. He woke to the sound of strange voices speaking in a language he did not understand, and when he opened his eyes, he found himself surrounded by humans pointing metal tubes at his face. Their uniforms were simple and functional, their expressions a mixture of fear and determination. "Do not kill me," Velcris said, activating his universal translator. "I am Ambassador Velcris of the Scythian Dominion, and I come seeking help." The humans exchanged confused glances, clearly not expecting an alien to speak their language. After a moment, one of them, a woman with dark skin and silver hair and the bearing of a leader, stepped forward. "I am General Catherine Okonkwo of United Earth Defense Command," she said, her voice calm despite the extraordinary circumstances. "You have crashed on our planet without permission. Explain yourself." Velcris struggled to his feet, ignoring the weapons still pointed at him. "General, I know that my people dismissed your species as primitive, and I know that we refused to make contact because we thought you were beneath us. I am sorry for that arrogance, truly sorry, but right now none of that matters." He took a deep breath before continuing. "There is a threat coming, a machine intelligence called the Harvesters that consumes entire civilizations. They have destroyed my homeworld. They have crushed the greatest powers in the galaxy, and they are coming here." General Okonkwo raised an eyebrow but showed no fear. "And what do you expect us to do about it? According to you, we are just primitives playing with fire." "That is exactly why I came to you," Velcris said, his voice desperate. "Our weapons do not work. The Harvesters adapt to any energy-based attack within seconds. Plasma, gravitons, psionic weapons, they counter everything we throw at them." He looked at the metal tubes the soldiers carried, weapons he had once mocked. "But you do not use energy weapons, do you?" The general smiled, a cold and dangerous smile that made Velcris suddenly nervous. "You have been fighting them with energy weapons?" she asked. "Fancy beams and force fields and all that advanced technology?" Velcris nodded miserably. "That is your problem right there, Ambassador." She gestured for her soldiers to lower their weapons, then stepped closer to the alien ambassador. "Let me show you something." She pulled out a small device and projected images into the air. Images of human history, of wars and weapons and destruction on a scale that made Velcris's blood run cold. He saw mushroom clouds rising over cities, armies clashing with weapons that sprayed metal death across battlefields, ships sinking beneath waves of fire, and soldiers fighting hand to hand with nothing but knives and determination. "We have spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing each other, Ambassador," General Okonkwo said quietly. "We have nuclear weapons that can crack the crust of a planet. We have kinetic projectiles that move so fast they hit with the force of atomic bombs. We have biological agents and chemical weapons and things so terrible we promised never to use them again." She looked him directly in his 4 eyes. "Energy weapons. We have those too, but we never threw away the old stuff because we learned a long time ago that sometimes the simple solutions work best." Velcris felt something he had not felt since the attack began: hope. "You think you can fight them?" General Okonkwo turned to look at the sky, her eyes searching the stars where the Harvesters lurked. "Ambassador, your people called us primitive because we still use explosions and metal slugs. But let me tell you something about those explosions and metal slugs." She turned back to face him with fire in her eyes. "They do not care how advanced your shields are. They do not care about your adaptive algorithms. You cannot outsmart a bullet, and you cannot negotiate with a nuclear warhead." She extended her hand to him. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador. Let us show you how primitives fight a war." 18 months remained before the Harvesters would reach Earth, and humanity worked with a fury that Velcris had never seen in any species. He stood in the observation gallery of the Armstrong Orbital Shipyard, watching as thousands of human workers assembled warships using techniques that the conquered would have considered hopelessly outdated. There were no elegant force fields holding pieces in place, no graviton manipulators guiding components into position, just human hands in heavy suits wielding tools that sparked and flashed in the darkness of space. "How many ships have you built?" Velcris asked Admiral Chen Wei, the commander of Earth's first expeditionary fleet. The admiral, a small man with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor that never seemed to waver, checked his datapad. "We have completed 412 combat vessels so far, with another 200 in various stages of construction. We also have over 10,000 automated weapons platforms ready for deployment." Velcris shook his head in disbelief. "The Silithan Dominion had 3,000 ships, Ambassador, and the Harvesters destroyed them all within a week. 400 ships cannot hope to match that." Admiral Chen smiled thinly. "You are thinking like a conquered commander. You believe that more ships means more power. But we do not build ships to survive, we build them to kill. If one of our vessels destroys 10 of theirs before it dies, then we have won that exchange. This concept seemed barbaric to Velcris, the idea of intentionally sacrificing ships and crews, but he was beginning to understand that humans thought about war differently than any species he had encountered. "Come," Admiral Chen said. "Let me show you what we have prepared." They walked through the shipyard's massive corridors, past assembly lines where workers toiled around the clock in shifts, past storage bays filled with weapons and ammunition, past training facilities where soldiers practiced combat maneuvers with grim determination. The first stop was a hangar filled with long metal rods, each one about 10 meters in length and made of solid tungsten. "These are our kinetic kill vehicles," Admiral Chen explained. "We accelerate them to approximately 10% of the speed of light using electromagnetic rails. When they hit a target, they deliver more energy than a nuclear explosion, but there is no energy signature for the harvesters to analyze and adapt to." Velcris touched one of the rods, feeling its cold weight. "It is just metal," he said, still struggling to understand how something so simple could be effective. "Yes, just metal," Admiral Chen agreed. "Just metal moving so fast that it does not matter what kind of shields you have. You cannot adapt to physics, Ambassador. Mass times velocity squared is the same everywhere in the universe." They moved on to another section of the shipyard, where engineers were working on something that looked like a spacecraft wrapped in a shell of explosive charges. "This is our Orion-class battleship," Admiral Chen said with obvious pride. "It uses nuclear pulse propulsion, which means it rides a series of atomic explosions to achieve incredible speeds. Your conquered ships are faster in normal space, but they rely on energy systems that the harvesters can disrupt. Our ships run on explosions, and explosions do not care about disruption fields." Velcris watched as workers carefully installed another nuclear charge into the propulsion system. "Is this not incredibly dangerous?" he asked. "Extremely dangerous," Admiral Chen confirmed, "but danger has never stopped humans from doing what needs to be done." The tour continued to a weapons testing facility deep inside an asteroid, where scientists were working on something called the Kasaba howitzer. "This is a nuclear-shaped charge," explained Dr. Sarah Vasquez, the lead weapons designer. "We detonate a nuclear warhead behind a specially shaped plate of material, and the explosion is focused into a narrow beam of plasma and molten metal. It is essentially a nuclear lance that can cut through anything." She showed Velcris footage of a test firing, and he watched in horror as the beam punched through 3 meters of solid titanium like it was paper. "The harvesters adapt to plasma weapons," Velcris said weakly. Dr. Vasquez smiled. "They adapt to sustained plasma emissions from conventional weapons, yes, but this is different. This is a one-time pulse of such intensity that adaptation is meaningless. By the time their systems register what happened, the beam has already passed through their hull." More survivors from the conquered had reached Earth in the months since Velcris arrived, and they watched the human preparations with a mixture of hope and skepticism. Many still believed that primitive weapons could not defeat the harvesters. One Kelvoran representative voiced this doubt during a strategy meeting. "You are building weapons that our ancestors abandoned thousands of years ago," she said through her translation device. "The harvesters have defeated fleets with technology far beyond yours. What makes you think explosions and metal slugs will succeed where plasma cannons failed?" General Okonkwo stood to respond, and the room fell silent. "Your plasma cannons are elegant," she said. "They are clean and precise and they make pretty lights in the darkness. But they have one fatal flaw. They give the enemy information." She activated a display showing harvester ships in combat. "Every time you fire an energy weapon, you tell the harvesters exactly what frequency you are using, what power level, what modulation pattern. Their adaptive systems analyze this information and generate countermeasures within seconds." She switched the display to show human weapons. Our kinetic weapons tell them nothing. A tungsten rod has no frequency, no modulation, no pattern to analyze. It is just mass, and there is no way to adapt to mass except by not being where it hits. The Kelvoran representative still seemed doubtful. But surely they can track the projectiles and move out of the way. Admiral Chen stepped forward. They can try, but we have thought of that too. We do not fire single projectiles. We fire thousands at once in patterns designed to limit evasion options. We also use autonomous drones that adjust their targeting in real time. The harvesters have never fought an enemy that uses disposable weapons controlled by disposable machines. He pulled up another display showing swarms of small spacecraft. These are our hunter-killer drones. Each one carries a small nuclear warhead and a simple targeting system. They have no shields, no fancy technology, no crews to protect. They are cheap to build, and we have millions of them. Millions, the Kelvoran asked in disbelief. Humans are good at building things in large numbers, Admiral Chen said with a slight smile. We call it mass production. When you do not care about elegance, you can focus entirely on quantity. Over the following months, Velcris watched humanity transform itself into a weapon. Every factory that could be converted to military production was converted. Every scientist who could contribute to the war effort did so. Every person who could serve in some capacity served without question. There were no debates about whether to fight, no arguments about the morality of violence, no hesitation in the face of existential threat. Humanity simply looked at the danger coming toward them and began to prepare with a ruthless efficiency that frightened Velcris more than the harvesters did. A harvester scout arrived at the edge of the solar system on a quiet Tuesday morning. It scanned the third planet from the sun and detected a pre-ascendant civilization using primitive technology. Its databases contained no records of this species ever defeating a harvester vessel, and its probability calculations indicated that resistance would be negligible. It transmitted a message to the main swarm: primitive species detected, resistance negligible, recommend standard harvesting protocols. That transmission was the last signal it ever sent. 7 tungsten rods traveling at 30,000 kilometers per second struck the scout simultaneously, converting it into an expanding cloud of superheated debris before its adaptive shields could even register the attack. Admiral Chen reviewed the combat data with grim satisfaction. "First contact," he said quietly. "Let them come. We are ready." The Harvester Armada entered the solar system like a plague of metal locusts, 10,000 ships blotting out the stars as they moved toward the small blue planet that their scout had identified as an easy target. On the bridge of the flagship UES Defiance, Admiral Chen Wei watched the enemy approach on the main display. Beside him stood Velcris, who had insisted on being present for the battle that would determine the fate of Earth and perhaps the entire galaxy. "There are so many," Velcris whispered, his 4 eyes wide with terror. The Concord's greatest fleet had only 3,000 ships, and these machines crushed them like insects. Admiral Chen remained perfectly calm. "Numbers are not everything, Ambassador. Watch and learn." He opened a channel to all human forces. "This is Admiral Chen to all units. The enemy has entered our killing ground. Initiate Phase 1. Throughout the outer solar system, hidden among the asteroids and frozen debris of the Oort cloud, billions of small objects began to wake up. These were humanity's minds, simple fusion triggers wrapped around chunks of rock and metal, scattered across millions of kilometers of space. The Harvester fleet flew directly into the minefield without slowing down, their sensors dismissing the small objects as natural space debris. After all, no civilized species would waste resources on something as crude as explosive mines. The first detonation caught them completely off guard. A chain reaction ripped through the outer ranks of the fleet as mine after mine exploded in brilliant flashes of nuclear fire. Hundreds of harvester ships vanished in seconds, their adaptive shields useless against the simple fury of atomic explosion that came from every direction at once. Phase 1 successful, reported a tactical officer. Enemy fleet has lost approximately 800 vessels. Velcro stared at the display in shock. You destroyed 800 ships with mines, with simple mines. Simple and effective, Admiral Chen replied. The harvesters have never fought an enemy willing to cede space itself with weapons. They expected a fleet battle, not a death trap. But the harvesters were not defeated. 9,000 ships continued forward, their formations tightening as they pushed through the minefield and toward the inner system. Their machine intelligences began to analyze the threat, cataloging the explosive signatures and adjusting their sensors to detect the remaining mines. They are adapting, Velcro warned. We expected that, Admiral Chen said. Initiate Phase 2. Hidden among the asteroids of the belt between Mars and Jupiter, 300 human warships and thousands of automated weapons platforms revealed themselves. Massive electromagnetic rails charged with power, their targeting systems locked onto the approaching enemy. Fire, Admiral Chen ordered. The darkness of space lit up with trails of tungsten death as thousands of kinetic rounds accelerated to incredible speeds. There were no pretty energy beams, no elegant plasma lances, just metal moving so fast that it became more destructive than any weapon the Conquered had ever built. The first volley struck the harvester fleet like the fist of an angry god. Ship after ship exploded as tungsten penetrators punched through their hulls. The harvesters tried to adapt, tried to analyze the incoming projectiles, but there was nothing to analyze. The rounds had no energy signature, no frequency, no weakness to exploit. They were just mass, and mass cared nothing for adaptive shields. Enemy losses now exceed 2,000, the tactical officer reported. They are attempting evasive maneuvers. The harvester fleet scattered, individual ships trying to dodge the relentless hail of kinetic rounds, but the human weapons platforms adjusted their fire patterns, predicted the evasion attempts, and continued to score hits. For the first time in their existence, the harvesters faced an enemy they could not easily counter. But they were not called a galactic threat for nothing. The machine fleet regrouped and began to push forward with renewed aggression, accepting losses in exchange for closing the distance to the human positions. Their weapons, still deadly against physical targets, began to return fire, and human ships started to die. We have lost the asterisk Relentless and the Courage asterisk, reported the tactical officer. 3 weapons platforms destroyed. Admiral Chen nodded grimly. Expected losses, continue firing, do not let up for a second. The battle raged across millions of kilometers as the harvester fleet pushed through the asteroid belt, leaving a trail of destroyed human platforms behind them. But for every human ship that fell, dozens of harvester vessels were torn apart by kinetic rounds and nuclear mines. By the time the fleet reached Mars, they had lost over half their numbers. 5,000 ships remained, still a terrifying force, and they had begun to develop tactics against the kinetic weapons. Their movements became more unpredictable, their formations more spread out, making it harder for the human targeting systems to score clean hits. They are learning, Velcro observed. They always learn. Admiral Chen watched the enemy approach with steady eyes. Then it is time for our final lesson. He opened a channel to 12 special ships that had been held in reserve throughout the battle. Lazarus units, you are authorized to engage. May whatever gods you believe in watch over you. 12 ships broke away from the main human fleet and accelerated toward the heart of the Harvester Armada. They were not elegant vessels, just heavily armored containers wrapped around the largest antimatter warheads humanity had ever built. There were no human crews aboard, only simple virtual intelligences with a single command: get close and detonate. The harvesters recognized the threat too late. Their weapons turned on the incoming ships, destroying 3 of them before they reached the fleet, but 9 made it through. 9 antimatter warheads detonated simultaneously in the center of the harvester formation. For one eternal moment, the space between Mars and Earth became brighter than the sun. The explosion was visible from Earth's surface in broad daylight, a new star blooming in the heavens that made people stop in the streets and stare upward in wonder and terror. When the light faded, the Harvester Armada was gone. Not retreating, not regrouping, simply gone. 5,000 ships reduced to atoms and expanding plasma, wiped from existence by the simple brutal power of matter annihilating matter. On the bridge of the Defiance asterisk, silence reigned as the crew processed what they had just witnessed. Confirmed kills, the tactical officer finally said, her voice shaking. All remaining harvester vessels destroyed. The battle is over. Cheers erupted throughout the ship, throughout the fleet, throughout every human vessel and station and base in the solar system. They had done the impossible. They had defeated an enemy that had crushed the greatest civilizations in the galaxy. Velcris sank to his knees, tears streaming from his 4 eyes. "You did it," he whispered. "You actually did it." Admiral Chen allowed himself a small smile. "We did what we have always done, Ambassador. We survived. We fought with everything we had, sacrificed what needed to be sacrificed, and refused to surrender." He looked out at the debris field that had once been an invincible armada. "Your conquered believed that advanced technology was the key to victory, that elegant weapons and sophisticated shields would protect you from any threat. But you forgot something important." "What did we forget?" Velcris asked. "That war is not about elegance. It is about destruction, and nobody in this galaxy has spent more time studying destruction than humans." Velcris rose slowly to his feet, looking at the human admiral with new eyes. "The conquered called you primitive because you still used explosions and projectiles. They laughed at your nuclear weapons and your kinetic rounds." He glanced at the display, where the light of human weapons still flickered among the stars. "They are not laughing anymore." Admiral Chen nodded slowly. "No, they are not. And when word of this battle spreads across the galaxy, when the other species learn what happened here today, they will understand something that the conquered never did." He turned to face the alien ambassador directly. "Primitive does not mean weak. Sometimes primitive means dangerous, and humans are the most dangerous primitives the galaxy has ever seen." 5 years had passed since the Battle of Earth, and the galaxy had changed in ways that nobody could have predicted. Velcris stood in the great assembly hall of New Conquered Station, a massive structure that humanity had built in orbit around their homeworld. The survivors of the original conquered species had gathered here, along with dozens of other civilizations that had heard stories of the humans who defeated the harvesters. The chamber was filled with beings of every shape and size: energy creatures in containment fields, insectoid hive minds communicating through chemical signals, crystalline entities that sang their words in frequencies most species could not hear, and many others who had traveled across the galaxy to witness this historic moment. At the center of the chamber stood the human delegation, led by General Catherine Okonkwo, who had been elected Secretary General of the United Earth Government after the war. Beside her stood Admiral Chen Wei and Dr. Sarah Vasquez, the heroes who had designed the weapons that saved humanity. Velcris, now serving as Earth's first alien ambassador, stepped forward to address the assembly. "5 years ago, I came to this world as a refugee, fleeing from an enemy that had destroyed everything I knew. The humans I encountered could have turned me away. They could have ignored my warnings and let the harvesters sweep through their system without ever knowing what hit them." He paused, looking around the chamber at the hundreds of alien faces watching him. Instead, they listened. They prepared. And when the harvesters came, they fought with weapons that my people had dismissed as primitive. A murmur ran through the assembly. The story of the Battle of Earth had spread across the galaxy like wildfire, but many still struggled to believe that such crude technology could defeat an enemy that had crushed the most advanced civilizations in existence. Today, humanity presents its terms for joining the galactic community, Velcris continued. I urge you all to listen carefully and to remember what they accomplished when the rest of us had failed. Secretary General Okonkwo stepped forward, her presence commanding the attention of every being in the chamber. Representatives of the galactic community, I thank you for coming. I know that many of you still view humanity as primitive, as a young species that got lucky against the harvesters. Some of you have suggested that we should be grateful for the opportunity to serve as junior members of your reconstructed Concord. Her eyes swept across the assembly, cold and unwavering. Let me be clear about something. We are not here to ask for your acceptance. We are here to inform you of the new reality. She activated a holographic display that showed the human military forces that had been built over the past 5 years. In the time since the Battle of Earth, humanity has expanded its fleet to over 3,000 combat vessels. We have established weapons platforms throughout our solar system and in 17 other star systems. We have developed new weapons based on the lessons we learned from the Harvester conflict. The display showed images of massive railgun installations, automated defense networks, and ships unlike anything the Conquered had ever built. We have also sent expeditions to the remains of Harvester territory and confirmed that fragments of their fleet survived our attack. They are rebuilding in the darkness between galaxies, and they will return eventually. When they do, they will be stronger and smarter than before. A wave of fear rippled through the assembly. Many had hoped that the harvesters were truly gone, that the nightmare was over. This is why humanity is not asking for permission to join your community, Secretary General Okonkwo continued. We are telling you that we will take our place as equals, or we will stand alone. Either way, we will be ready when the harvesters return. One of the Emrandal representatives, an energy being named Thelos, rose to speak. You cannot simply demand equality. Your species is barely 100 years into spaceflight. We have civilizations here that are millions of years old. There are protocols and traditions that must be respected. Secretary General Okonkwo smiled, and there was no warmth in it. Your protocols and traditions did not stop the harvesters, Elder Thelos. Your millions of years of advancement did not save your people when the machines came. My species has been flying among the stars for less than a century, and yet we are the ones who turned the tide. She stepped closer to the alien representative. We did not defeat the harvesters because we were more advanced than you. We defeated them because we were willing to do what you could not. We built weapons without elegance, without sophistication, without concern for anything except killing our enemies. We sent ships on suicide missions without hesitation. We turned our entire civilization into a war machine within months. Her voice hardened. That is what humans do when our existence is threatened. We do not debate, we do not hesitate, we do not surrender. We fight with everything we have until either we win or we die. That is our gift, and that is our curse. Silence filled the chamber as the assembled species processed her words. Velcris watched his human friends with a mixture of pride and something that might have been fear. He had come to know them well over the past 5 years, and he understood now what he had failed to see when he first surveyed their world. They were not primitive, they were focused. Every other species in the galaxy had evolved past their violent origins, had developed philosophies of peace and cooperation, had built technologies that made brute force unnecessary. The humans had done these things too, but they had never forgotten how to be violent. They had kept their weapons and their warriors and their willingness to kill. It was not a failing, It was a survival trait. "We accept humanity's terms," Elder Thelos finally said, his energy form flickering with what might have been resignation. "Full recognition of human sovereignty, unrestricted access to galactic technology, and a permanent seat on the Council." Other representatives voiced their agreement, one by one, until the vote was unanimous. Secretary General Okonkwo nodded in satisfaction. "Then we have an alliance. Humanity will share its weapons technology with any species that wants it. We will train your warriors in our methods of combat. When the harvesters return, they will not face a galaxy of isolated civilizations fighting alone. They will face a united front armed with the most effective weapons ever created." She looked around the chamber one final time. "The machines made a mistake when they attacked us. They thought we were easy prey because our technology looked primitive. But primitive weapons worked when your advanced technology failed. That is a lesson worth remembering." After the assembly concluded, Velcris returned to his office on New Concord Station to record an updated species assessment for the Galactic Archives. It would replace his original report, the one that had dismissed humanity as pre-ascendant primitives destined to destroy themselves. He sat at his desk and began to speak. "This is Ambassador Velcris, formerly of the Silithan Dominion, now serving as Earth's representative to the galactic community. I am recording this assessment to correct the errors of my previous report on the human species." He gathered his thoughts before continuing. "Initial classification of humans as primitive has been revised. Their technology is not inferior to ours. It is different. Where we sought elegance, they sought effectiveness. Where we developed shields, they developed bigger weapons. Where we tried to outsmart our enemies, they simply tried to kill them more efficiently." He thought about the Battle of Earth, about the nuclear fire that had lit up the stars, about the billions of minds that had worked together to build weapons of such terrible power. Humans did not ascend beyond violence like other civilizations. Instead, they mastered it. They turned destruction into a science and death into an art form. They are not primitive. They are patient. They are resourceful. And when threatened, they are more dangerous than any species the galaxy has ever known. He paused, remembering General Okonkwo's cold smile and Admiral Chen's steady calm. "Classification updated. Apex Predator, threat level, extreme, recommendation. Maintain alliance at all costs. Do not provoke under any circumstances." He ended the recording and sent it to the archives, hoping that future generations would remember the lesson that the harvesters had learned too late. Humanity was not primitive. Humanity was just getting started.